Hello, hello everyone. Good evening. So today is the 37th episode of the Author Collaborative. In these sessions, I talk with fellow authors whose books I have read, and we talk about the writing process and journeys that they underwent while writing those books. We discuss the books we have read of each other, and it's a fun session, learning fun learning session for everyone who joins in the session. Hello Devansh. Hello Namita. Thank you for joining. Good evening. I am waiting for today's guest to come online so I can add him to the session. In the meanwhile, if you have any questions for me, or if you would like me to answer any particular things or talk about anything in particular, please let me know in the comments till the time we wait for the guest. Hey Namita, good evening. How are you? Yeah, just waiting for the guest to come online so I can add him to the session. Let me tell you something about today's guest. He is Shakti Ghosal, and he's the author of the book The Chronicle of the Hugli and Other Stories. And it's a collection of short stories mostly based in. Hello. Okay, he's here. So I'm just going to add him and invite him here. Yes, Namita, I am very well. Thank you so much for asking. I'm just waiting for Shakti sir to join us. Hello, Shakti
Hi.
ji.
Hi, Manali. Good to be with you.
Yes. Finally, we are able to do this session. So I was just introducing you to the audience, saying that your book is a wonderful collection of short stories, which are mostly based in Kolkata, or as we used to refer to it back then as Calcutta.
Yeah,
So before we start the Q&A and ask each other so many questions that we have for each other, can you introduce yourself to the audience?
sure. As Manali has said, my name is Shakti Ghosal. Been a corporate life for 40 years. I've worked in organizations and in the corporate in India and abroad. Now, of course, I'm not in an active corporate life. However, I do a few interesting things which are close to my heart. I do some workshop training and coaching, leadership coaching for organizations, and I also am a visiting professor at a few IIMs, and that's about it. What I do, apart from, of course, having written this book, last year.
Yes, and it's amazing that you have been able to write such an amazing book alongside such a busy work schedule that you have, like full-time job and freelance work that you do as a professor teaching faculty.
Yeah.
So my reading of this book, it made me think so much that since you belong to Calcutta, and I think it comes out so well in the stories, the love that you have for native, and so I have a few questions related to that, if you are willing to answer.
Sure. Sure. Absolutely.
Yes. So as a writer, do you feel that we are drawn towards writing about our native, and if so, according to you, how important is it to, as a fiction writer, bring that part of our love, our attachment into the writing?
Okay. Let me respond in this manner. As humans, each one of us actually are unique storytellers. Uh, there is always a story inside each one of us, whether it comes out or not at a point in time. That's another matter. So let us try and understand what is that which synchronizes this need to tell a story with our native, which I'm taking to mean, our native land, culture, etc., etc. I suppose it all comes down to a shared history,
Hmm.
which becomes the genesis of our storytelling in one way or the other. So, our shared history, for example, relates to our life experiences with our parents, family, friends, school, etc. The tales we heard while we were sitting on our mother's lap when we were children, this comfort, this past knowledge and experiences really allows us to contextualize what we end up relating as stories. I suppose this is how the native aspect really becomes important when we write fiction. It's all about the comfort, each one of our comforts. Since you are also an author, I realize you would sort of maybe able to see it yourself to create such contexts. Having said that, I need to tell you that I've never been I'm not from Calcutta. I've lived only the last 6 years here, and I was born and brought up in Delhi. That city too figures in my stories, and the story Fault Line is based primarily in a place called Muscat in Oman, where I was fortunate to have lived almost a quarter of a century. To that extent, yes, that too is a native to me. I don't know if I could respond to your question.
No, that's true, because even in my story, I don't want to talk about it in detail right now, but it is based in Mumbai, but I'm not a person who was born in Mumbai. I have lived there for, from in my growing up years, a major part of my adulthood, I have lived in the city, and that's why it shows. And I don't think I can call it a native, but it's still close to my heart.
Yes. And it actually shows up in your book, the one which I read, Love Triangle. Mumbai is so, I still like to call it Bombay, incidentally. It's so intrinsic to that book, and you actually feel you are there. The way, your protagonists are moving on the streets, how they are going in the, your trains, suburban trains, all that. It's very, very fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, so the most interesting part about your book and the most interesting story I found was where, the short story which talks about the comparison between two pandemics, which happened a century apart. And it was really, we have evolved as humans in the past 100 years, but if we look at it very intricately, we have not really progressed. That's what that story made me realize. So tell us about what made you get the inspiration for such a story, and how can one draw parallels between such universally impactful events.
Very interesting question. I took the opportunity of the forcible stay of lockdown, which happened last year for about 4 months in my case. And that is when I really sat down and wrote this book. Nothing much was happening. There were no phone calls, nothing to do actually. I did have a rough structure of the plots in my mind, and so I could put pen to paper. Figuratively speaking, nowadays you don't do that much. In March 2020, and it took about 4 months, from that time. As just like anyone else, or maybe all of us, we got reasonably curious, if not obsessed, with the why and how of this so-called pandemic. With media and internet actually overflowing with information and data, some of it accurate, some of it mindset, some of it rumors, and so on. It seemed a very natural corollary that I ended up writing a story on the pandemic. That's how the pandemic came up. Now, you ask about the aspect about parallels, and this is where I have an interesting take, Drawing parallels to me, is something very natural to us humans. We draw parallels to make sense of something unfolding in front of us based on our experiences from the past. That is all we have. Our brains have that experience. Our brains are wanting to make sense of what is there. So the parallel making is always there in one way or the other, and checking up what is the parallel, what are the differences, and so on. This is how our brains actually work. So really, one does not need to keep any, how shall I put it, anything specific in our mind, insights into parallels, similarities and dissimilarities would emerge for us almost like a natural expression, as our brain starts making sense of what it is perceiving. That, I think, is the aspect about the parallel situation. It was quite natural that the two pandemics had to come together, at that point in time.
Yeah, and that's very true. It's very intuitive, if I could use the word. It comes from
Yeah.
our own experience, so we cannot consciously do it because we have experienced it, and that comes naturally to us. So that's very true.
Yes.
So another story which I found very interesting was where you talk about the pre-independence era. I'm forgetting the title of the story, but it
Australia.
was
Australia. That's the first one. Yeah.
yes. Yeah, and the other one where there's this lady. I don't want to give out spoilers, but we have talked about. Oh, it's the titular story. I'm so sorry. It's a titular story, which it's pre-independence, and then we have somebody from that family who's talking about that story, and it's so intricately woven, and we have some historical facts in the fictional story. I was very fascinated by that story because of two things. Because it's fiction, and yet you have managed to put in historical facts into it. And second, how were you able to draw such a long line of history relating it to the current? So,
Yeah.
my next question is based on this. When we are writing historical fiction, what kind of research should one do, and what kind of care should be taken by the author?
That's a very good question, Manali, and I must acknowledge you for this. See, the most important aspect to be kept in mind, that's the way I look at it, is to eschew all judgment and not fall prey to our own preconceived beliefs. All of us have beliefs. We may sort of see them, or we may not even actually be conscious of them, but there are beliefs about everything around us. So we have to eschew that judgment. Um, we get exposed to certain narratives around us, and they come with some biases every time. So as a historical writer of fiction, really, I believe the best way to portray situations is through showcasing events, even interactions, impartially, and allowing the reader to make his own judgment, rather than me sort of coming up and the story and then coming to some kind of a conclusive judgment. Just be away, keep away from that. That, I think, is fair, number one. And number two, I think it makes the reader think a little bit more, as he or she has sort of reads the story. There is always the other side of any story. There's a counter narrative, and it's worthwhile to be cognizant as writers that there would always be such counter narratives. So whether tomorrow I want to write about what happened in Afghanistan, let's say,
Mm.
and all of us, or most of us, have read that wonderful story which was written by Khaled Hosseini, The Kite Runner,
Oh.
which was
And a
based
thousand
in
kilometers.
Afghanistan. Yeah. And when I was seeing this thing and unfolding in front of my eyes this time, my memory was going back to that book,
Yeah.
by Khaled Hosseini, because I could almost see certain things sort of repeating and certain things happening there on the ground, though I was not physically seeing them. So that research aspect is important. For example, the as you mentioned, the titular story, The Chronicler of the Hooghly, has considerably history intertwined, as part of the narrative. And at the end of the book, I've actually acknowledged all the sources that actually supported me. As I put pen to paper, of course. That's in today's parlance, it would be putting
Yeah.
fingers on the
Hand
keyboard.
to the hand to the keyboard. Now.
Yes, yes, yes. So that is what I would like to really think is important. Yeah.
Okay, and yes, as you were mentioning about Afghanistan, it's very true because as we watch the news related to Afghanistan, it's very impossible for literature lovers to not think about the books that we have read on what is happening in Afghanistan, and that's like a sign of great writing by the author that it makes us think about it even today, and we are able to draw parallels in real life right now to a book which was written almost 20 years ago. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, so that brings me to my last question. And in my opinion, the most important question for any author, it is because I believe more than the writing, it has become really very complex and difficult to promote what you are writing. So my last question to you is, how important is it to invest in publishing and promotions after you are done writing the first draft of your book? What kind of an investment should a writer make?
You know, uh, investment is flows out of one's inner commitment.
Hmm.
And it's not only investment in money, investment in time, thinking,
Yes.
everything. My sense is that there has to be a significantly, see, I'm a rookie author, first book. You are much more experienced than me. But my sense is that there has to be a significantly long commitment and stakeholding by all concerned parties. In my case, there was a publisher. So I would say that first and foremost, the author has to work in tandem with the publisher. Sometimes we may sort of not agree on everything, right?
Hmm. True.
But still, that has to be there, and all promotion efforts needs to be synchronized between the two.
Hmm.
Information sharing therefore becomes very important. Uh, Say after you have written your first draft and you have sent it to the publisher, and let's say the publisher accepts, and then because the publishing itself, if you go the traditional route, it takes a long time.
Yes.
I mean, it cannot take anything
Nothing less than
below
six
5 to 6
months.
months. That is the way it
Yeah.
is. So that is the time when you need to invest in building curiosity and a following for
Hmm.
your forthcoming book, because by that time you know what the book is going to be called, and that could be done through social media, word of mouth, some talk shows, some interviews, some sessions like what we are doing today,
True.
all that, and that I think would be the way to look at it. There are other options of publishing today, to authors, and so those are available. But then
Hmm.
I can only talk from the experience which I have had till now.
True. And as you said, yes, it's very important to start talking about your book before the publishing itself,
Yeah,
and to create a sort of curiosity in the minds of the readers that they are
yeah,
anticipating something. By the time it comes out, there is a good amount of anticipation among the readers.
yeah.
So that's about it from my side in the long form questions. Since you have read my book too, I'm sure you have some questions for me as well.
Oh yes, absolutely. The first question, Manali, is comes from my curiosity. Um, your, I mean, the narrative is so nicely it flows, but somewhere in the end, to me as a reader, it sort of stops a bit abruptly. Now, you as an author, I presume, must have had a reason to do that. And of course, one reason could have been, and I'm just thinking aloud, is uh, that you are allowing the reader to sort of look at possibilities that exists beyond the book. That comes to me, as a reader. But I would like to hear from you as the author.
Yes, I am being very honest here. When the idea of this story came to me, I
Yeah,
was very clear about the climax from the very beginning. From that point onwards, it just became
yeah,
a means of justifying the end. The entire story, uh,
huh,
while writing, it was always a chapter or a narrative or an incident where it is justifying why the characters did what they did in the climax. So for me, that was the main thing. Besides that, as you have mentioned, I wanted to leave it to the audience to figure out what really happened. It's an open-ended climax where I want people to understand that it's not necessary to have very conventional happy endings in every story. You are free
yeah,
to depict your own endings anywhere you want. And also, I wanted to show the character development of Aisha, who was the main protagonist of the story. It was not about the boys. Anytime in the book, if you notice, it was always about Aisha and her character growth.
yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, and the other question I have is, you have this a spellbinding beginning of the book, and I don't want to be a spoiler here, but there is something which you wrote which sort of hits you in the stomach. And I think that the opening chapter, um, you know, uh, leads the or ensures that the reader quickly gets into the rest of your book.
Yes.
Um, um, Now, I mean, while I can understand the intent, I would like you to tell me that opening chapter, without actually telling me or talking about what it was, how do you see that shapes the thought, the thinking, even the personality of your main protagonist, who is Aisha?
If you notice the entirety of the book, I have shown Aisha from the age of probably 14 to the age of 26, 27.
Yeah.
And if you see from the first chapter to the last chapter, the one thing that has remained like very consistent in her behavior is her thought process towards feminism. She is a very staunch feminist right from her teenage to her adulthood. And we can see the maturity in the poem from the beginning to the last. That's also visible. And that's how I wanted to draw the parallels that though she has remained the same, we see growth in the same aspects of her personality. And that's why I wanted to begin with that. So,
Very fascinating. That's very fascinating. What I heard you just now, and actually, when you say this now, actually, I was thinking about the book as I was listening to you, and yes, absolutely right. That seeds of that so-called feminism, the seeds of the feministic mindset, if I may use such a term, actually starts from that first verse, or the first something which she actually reads out, or she actually talks about, standing on a stage actually, and so there is a spellbinding silence after that. What
yes.
So yeah. um, Another thing that comes to my mind, and again very intriguing. See, so we have Aisha, and of course, again, not to be a spoiler, and she has two interests in her life. Let me put it that way. I wouldn't even like to talk about the names here. Uh, the rationalization which she uses when she is with uh, person A, vis-a-vis when she is with person B, they are quite different.
Yeah, very different. Yes.
Okay. Now, what is it that was at the core of your creating this kind of an individual with such a mindset?
Though Aisha is very mature for her age, I was trying to show that when it comes to the matters of the heart, everyone is a child, especially during their teenage and growing up years. These things, the
Yeah.
matters of the heart, are something you can only understand when you experience them. Though you are academically brilliant, or you are excelling in other parts of your life, like she's brilliant in her studies, she's topping her class everywhere, she's a good debater, she's a good writer, but when it comes to the matters of the heart, she's still a child. And that aspect was necessary to show in the way of the two protagonists, and how differently she behaves around the two of them. Despite being close to both of them, she's attracted to one a little differently in comparison to the other. And that
Yes.
was, yeah, that was what I was trying to bring out. And my intention behind that was to show that children, if I can use that term, she's not a child, but she starts off as a child, and then we see her blossoming into this young inspirational woman that she becomes by the end of the story. But it was necessary to show that that understanding could only come into her after having befriended a certain different types of males around her.
Mm. And the my takeaway really from this particular aspect of your book was that, see, it shows the complexity of our minds itself. So now we like to believe that each one of us has a particular mindset, and once that mindset is there, I sort of everything flows as per that particular route, but it is not so. We actually are a repository of several mindsets.
and
You
and
know,
I believe we show a different side of our personality to the different people we come in contact with.
absolutely, absolutely, and this contrarian aspect of our minds, and they can be very contrarian at times.
Yes.
Is what is so fascinating. When you sort of delve into storytelling, where you bring in this particular aspect, and to me that was very fascinating. I need to acknowledge you. Personally, I think this is the most powerful aspect about your book.
Thank you so much. That means a lot to me. Thank you very much. Because
Yeah,
I have consciously tried to, bring out that personality in Aisha through the characters of Abhi and Vidhi.
yeah, yeah. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, these are the most important questions that I have in mind, Manali. So I'll stop here.
Thank you so much. They were really interesting questions, and I have never been asked these kind of questions related to the book because, as the creator of the book, you know how we are passionate about talking about what went behind the creation of these things, little things in the story, and it makes us feel very, touched when someone notices it and asks us relevant questions related to those.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, so before we end the session, because it has been very informative and I have gained a lot of knowledge through whatever answers you asked, whatever questions you asked, and
Me too.
I'm so before we end this very heavy session, let's end it on a fun note where we do a round of rapid fire questions.
Yeah,
I have a few questions for you, and you have to answer as quickly as possible. Okay.
yeah.
My first question to you is an ability or characteristic or a habit of a popular author you wish you had.
The habit of observing life and that of active listening.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's I think observation is something very intrinsic to writing because if you are not a keen observer, you can't bring that out in your writing, in your narrative. Very true. Okay, writing or reading, if you had to pick just one, which would you pick and why?
This is a tough choice. I'd like to pick both, as in my case, writing and reading form two sides of the same coin. One virtuously supports the other.
That is very true. Very true. Okay, a habit of yours which you wish that more writers or authors had.
Self-discipline. I'm very proud of that.
I also feel that many authors lack that. They have the skill, but they are not disciplined enough to, bring that aspect into their writing. Very true.
Yeah.
A habit of yours which your family and friends find very annoying.
Impatience. I have been having this, my way or highway kind of a mindset. So very annoying to others.
I can understand that. Okay. This is a very interesting question and my favorite one. I'm going to ask you questions A, B, C, D related to a popular book. Okay. So first is a popular book you wish A was never adapted.
Five People You Meet in Heaven by Mitch Albom.
Okay. I have not read the book, neither have I seen the movie. So I'm going to have to just nod my head and say okay. Second, a popular book you think needs to be adapted.
Today, The Kite Runner by Khalid Hussein.
Uh,
I'll actually, would like to say that.
Very true. Okay. Third, popular book should you feel should never be adapted.
It's already been adapted, but I've Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell. You can't do anything better. I mean, so there's no point in trying to, I think it should never be adapted.
True. I mean, though I loved Red Butler, I mean the book is nowhere. The movie is nowhere in comparison to what the book did.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, my fourth question is a book you wish people would stop talking about.
The Satanic Verses by Salman Rushdie. It keeps on getting talked about. It's been there for such a long time with us. I think we should stop.
Okay. So now I leave the floor open for your rapid fire questions, if you have
Can I
any for me.
can I can I reflect back the same questions to you? Do you think that would make
Oh,
sense?
yes, of course. Yes, definitely.
Okay, an ability of characteristic habit of a popular author you wish you had.
To be able to publish more frequently, more consistently, because I am currently I'm only able to do one book per year, and I have seen authors being able to write 4 to 5 books per year, and I wish I had that.
Okay, that's nice. Writing or reading? Which one would you pick?
Reading, reading.
Yeah, actually, when you read, writing flows out of that. So I agree. A habit of yours you wish more writers, authors had.
Uh, Planning, I think I am a very keen planner, and that aspect of my personality comes into my books. And I hope want more people to understand the importance of planning and how that impacts the quality of their stories.
So basically, planning and structuring the book right in the beginning, and getting into fair amount of detailing, then only you sort of start writing or filling
Yes,
up, if I may say, the storyline. Okay, I really agree. I really agree. That is something which I did not do in my first book. It's sort of the stories of flowing. They flow, and so I don't know. They sort of came out luckily fairly all right. But I think when you plan, you can actually bring out the nuances, and the structuring of your stories can be much better.
yes, yes.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and
I agree.
that only comes when you have written a couple of books and
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
understood what the audience expects from you. So I
Yeah, yeah,
understand
yeah.
that it takes times for new writers to understand the importance of planning and also imbibe that habit into them. So but I do wish that experienced writers would also do that, because I have seen experienced writers not having that planning aspect in their writing, which makes the stories very dull.
Yes, I agree. I agree. But very interesting. There is this right now. There's one serial which is sort of making a bit of waves. The Empire. It's basically on the Mughal Empire. It's there on Hotstar. And it is based on. I have read one of the books. Okay, the Mughals. I forget the author. It's been a. Um, and actually, what you said is so true. While the sort of direction of the serial, at least I've seen, I think 3 or 4 of those. This is the first season, very slick. But if you read the book, it's not so. So
Hmm.
actually, writing is much better than, in my view, vis-a-vis even the original writing.
Hmm.
A habit of yours that your family and friends find annoying?
That I don't pay attention to them when I'm working. It's all white noise for me when I'm working.
Wow.
That annoys them a lot.
But that's a fantastic habit, isn't it, Manali? I mean, what you're saying is you can get so drawn into the work you do, you forget about what's happening around you.
Yes, but they assume that just because I'm in the room, I should be listening to them. And when I say that I have not heard what they said, if the conversation continues after I'm done working and they're like, "We told you," and I'm like, "No, I didn't hear you." That becomes irritating for them.
Okay, let's talk about the popular book you wish was never adapted.
Oh my God. This is only one of the very few movies that I have actually loved more than the book. And I wish, the source was not where it came from. It's Kai Poche. I feel the movie is much better than the book.
Wow. I haven't read the book, but yes, the movie was fantastic. Totally agree. And needs to be adapted.
My book. Love Triangle.
Lovely, lovely, excellent. I personally feel if it falls into the right hand, it can become a very fascinating study in, as you have rightly called it, contemporary fiction.
Yeah, so I am also
Because
hoping that it
the
goes into the
characters
right
can be
hands.
developed. The characters can be. Okay, let me not be a spoiler, but every time you start your chapters with a quote unquote, and to
Yes.
me, those are
And
very powerful.
yeah, and if you notice the quality of the codes at the beginning of each chapter, you can see the growth in the codes as well.
Yes.
They change
Yes.
and become more matured over the chapter.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Um, should never be adapted.
I'm sorry if I'm sounding very offensive to people who love him, but I feel Chetan Bhagat's books should never be adapted again.
I would tend to agree. Except maybe, yeah, maybe one of his books. In the earlier ones, the later ones,
Yeah.
I think, I agree.
Now they are just becoming movie scripts, I think.
Yes, they are. They
And
absolutely.
very easy and predictable.
He's writing with the thought that they should be picked up as a movie script.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And they are becoming very predictable and very cheesy, for
Yeah,
the
yeah,
lack of better terms.
yeah. I agree. That's from my side, Manali. Thank you so much. It was see why I sort of thought I'll ask you your questions is, for both of us and also for if any of the audience. You see, there is a fascination about seeing the different responses coming to the same questions on the same
Yes.
phone.
Yes,
Yes,
that was very interesting actually, and thank you for asking me the same questions that I asked you. Uh, it was so revelation for both of us as well, right?
yes, yes.
We had quite a few people joining us. Thank you everyone for joining. I hope you guys had fun. Thank you Shakti for being a guest on this segment, and for you and for everyone else, this video will be uploaded on my IGTV. I will also be uploading it on my YouTube channel, where people who have not been able to catch the full conversation right now, they can go back and have a look and watch watch in peace, understand what we have talked about, learn from it probably.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure, and hope to sort of be in touch with you once again.
Same here, Shakti, and
Okay.
thank you once again. Have a great day ahead. Bye.
Same to you. Same to you. Take care. Bye bye.